So the river itself is about 4,250 miles long.
Amazing.
It feels quite strange looking at the map now after walking it.
We are here in sunny Pittsfield, Vermont for Spartan Up podcast. On my right, I've got Dr. Colonel Nye. I've got Johnny Waite, and I've got Sephra Levin.
I could be Levison for this one.
Oh yeah. Oh, you want to be Sephra Levison for this one?
Well,
How about this
I'm
guy?
blushing.
Does he fly a helicopter?
And so we talked to Levison Wood. Actually, Delle did, right?
Hey, Delle.
He walked the entire Nile,
Yeah.
and he had just escaped an alligator, I think, when we got him.
Oh yeah, the stories this guy has are unbelievable. Yeah. So you walked the entire length of the Nile. I'm looking forward to this.
Let's check it out.
Yeah.
Dendritic pattern.
I'm here in London for Spartan Up UK, and we've been joined by explorer Levison Wood. Lev, thanks so much for coming to chat to us. You've got an incredible story because you are literally fresh off the plane.
Literally last night, straight off the plane, yep.
Tell us what you've been up to.
Well, for the past 9 months, I have been walking along the world's longest river, the River Nile, through 6 different countries, starting in the highlands of Rwanda, through Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan, Sudan, and finally Egypt, which I returned from yesterday. Covered well over 5,000 kilometres.
On foot?
Entirely on foot. It's been the most incredible adventure I could have ever imagined.
So where did you fly into? Where did you start?
I started way down here in Rwanda. So Lake Victoria is generally sort of seen as the source of the White Nile, and then you've got the Blue Nile starts at Lake Tana in Ethiopia, so this is longer by pretty much twice the distance. But actually Lake Victoria itself has got a few tributaries, so I thought, well, if you're going to do an expedition like this, go for the longest. So the longest tributary is the Kagera River. So started here on the border with the Congo, walked through Rwanda, this part of Tanzania to the lake, and then walked around, that's where the swamp was, I said. Walked around the lake to a place called Ginger, which is where John Hanning Speke in the 1860s sort of discovered the source of the Nile. And then all the way through Uganda to South Sudan. And this is the Sud Swamp, which is the area that was erupted into civil war, so I had to actually miss this bit, which is a huge shame, but I'm gonna go back and do the bit that I had to miss out at some point as soon as the civil war finishes. And then all the way through, this is where the Sahara Desert, this is obviously drawn on myself because this South Sudan got independence in 2011. Through the Sahara Desert, all the way around the Great Bend and the Bayuda Desert, into Egypt, around Lake Nasser, which is the second largest man-made lake in the world, and then all the way through Egypt, and that's where I was yesterday, just there.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday, right there, Rashid. So the river itself is about 4,250 miles long, just to this bit.
And do you know every part of it?
And I know pretty much every part of it, yeah.
Did it feel strange to get back to civilization then?
Yeah, walking around the lake, all of this is basically desert. And the river just cuts its way through it, and then finally arriving in Aswan. I mean, when people think of the Nile, they think of sort of gin and tonic on the veranda with a felucca, very Agatha Christie. Yeah. Whereas actually that's only this bit, the rest is just utter wilderness.
And what made you set about this challenge?
For me, I've done lots of big expeditions before, and my personal passion is walking as well. So I just love sort of long distance treks. I'm really interested in not only the sort of the physical aspects, the sort of testing myself to the extreme, but also exploring a region in terms of its environment and walking through different types of terrain. And on this expedition, I've literally seen every kind of environment that Africa has to offer, from jungles and rainforests through the world's biggest swamp in South Sudan to walking through the Sahara Desert in the summer. So there's all those sides of things, but also I'm interested in the people and the anthropology, so meeting lots of different cultures, and in this part of Africa there's so many different cultures, and it's just a fascinating place. some of the countries where tourists just don't go to.
Because
Places
some of those areas are quite politically unstable.
Absolutely.
Are you not afraid?
Well, places like South Sudan, I mean, when I set off, it was in fact just 2 weeks after I set off, a civil war erupted, which caused lots of complications. You know, in Egypt, there was the Arab Spring, and the revolution there meant that very politically unstable. And you know, of course, there are big risks involved in doing an expedition like this, and not just from a political and sort of, you know, bureaucratic point of view. Going through Uganda, going through national parks, there's lots of wildlife that can potentially really ruin your day. You know, I was walking through national parks where you've got lion, buffalo, elephants, really up close and personal. But I think as long as you do your homework and manage those risks, you know, whether that's making sure you've got armed guards in certain areas or park rangers which sort of mitigate against those threats, then you can do it as safely as possible. There will be risks, but I think that's part of going on an expedition, is embracing risk, and for me that's what it's all about, because without those risks you don't get the rewards that can come of these things.
Have you always been a bit of a risk taker?
I think so, yeah, for sure. I mean, I spent a number of years in the British Army, in the parachute regiment, so I sort of jumped out of planes for a living.
So you're cut for this.
So I mean, it's a good training, you know, and it gets you in the right mental frame of mind. Yeah.
And what were the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome to achieve this?
Some really big, like I say, physically it was really tough, you know, having to walk big distances, 20, 25 miles a day, every day for weeks and months on end was the biggest physical challenge that I've ever encountered. Mentally motivating yourself to wake up in the morning and go and do that, spending, you know, long weeks on the road at a time where the environment doesn't necessarily change, you know, especially through the desert. It's just flat sand for weeks and weeks at a time, which can be quite mentally draining. And as I said before, you know, the actual physical dangers. But yeah, one of the biggest challenges was going through, you know, walking through a war zone through South Sudan, which was, you know, terrible, seeing some of the things that's going on there. And it really, you know, it raises lots of questions. You know, should you be putting yourself in extreme risks? Should you be putting other people in risks as well? So, lots of challenges from different aspects.
And you mentioned the word motivation. How did you stay motivated? Did you have days where you woke up and thought, I can't face this? Or
yeah, I think, you know, there were a number of days when you really sort of wonder if you've bitten off more than you can chew. But I think, I don't know, I'm quite stubborn. I think once I've set off on something like this, there's no way I was going to give up, really. So it was never really in doubt, although there were times when I really just didn't want to be there, and it always felt like a bit of a prison sentence at times.
And how did you cope with that? What did you think about?
I think the best thing to do is try not to think about anything, really. Try and sort of just turn your brain off, which can be, you know, really difficult. The monotony, the boredom, can be a real sort of mental taxation. And for me, it was trying to find the positives wherever you go, and actually be going through going through 6 different countries where extreme poverty, you know, is pretty evident everywhere you go. You kind of, you know, you're humbled all the time, and the people you meet incredibly friendly and hospitable people, who would literally rather die than drink before a guest. You know, it's that even in the desert, you know, the Bedouin tribes that you come across, they would give you their last drop of water rather than drink it themselves, which for me, you know, meant that it was a huge privilege, and no matter how difficult it was for me, these are the people that have to live there the whole time. So that's what kept me going.
Absolutely. You've been away for 9 months, you said, away from home.
Yeah.
What's the biggest lesson that you've learnt about sort of creature comforts and being away from everything?
Well, actually, I've come to realise that actually you don't really need much in terms of personal possessions. You know, there are certain things that are nice to have, but along the way, you know, I was robbed. I had lots of stuff stolen. Pretty much everything I had in terms of technology broke at one stage or another. So you can get by.
So you mentioned that you met some really, really difficult obstacles and challenges out there. Can you tell us about some of those examples? Yeah, sure.
Probably the biggest tragedy that happened on the expedition was actually the death of a colleague on the expedition. A man called Matt Powers, who was a journalist from the States, came out to write about the expedition to Uganda, and unfortunately he passed away whilst on the expedition with me, which was a huge tragedy and a terrible loss and a huge blow, obviously, you know, for his family and his friends, and also, you know, it really does question, you know, is it what I should be doing, you know, putting people's lives at risk.
What does success look like?
Well, for the past 9 months, it's been the Mediterranean Sea. That's what success has looked like, and I was there yesterday, which was amazing. The most incredible feeling was walking those last few miles along the road, and then suddenly, not really suddenly, it was gradually actually. Every mile I got closer, you could sort of smell the sea breeze, and the temperature sort of dropped as you got closer to the ocean, and then there it was suddenly, just incredible.
How has it been back in civilization then?
Well, I've only had a few hours here, and
spent with Spartan Up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but no, it's always nice to come home and have a nice cup of tea and a piece of toast.
Okay.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
So we're actually having tea. We're deliberately putting Lev out of his comfort zone because he has been on this long expedition. He doesn't normally have tea on a Louis Vuitton case.
No, I don't. This is a wonderful change to the norm for me, so thank you.
And you've been roughing it for 9 months.
9 months, yeah. So
Why?
This is nice. Why? For me, I think, it's just worth the risk, even though it's been hard and the most incredible challenge, physically, mentally, in every way. It's just worth it, that feeling of achieving something that's never been done before. But also, it's not just about world firsts and breaking records. It's about genuine exploration. I was going to places that haven't seen human beings in 10,000 years. Walking through the Sahara Desert, and you suddenly come across shards of pottery that were there from prehistoric times, or seeing the fact that you come across pieces of petrified wood, which meant that the Sahara Desert was a forest millions of years ago, and just seeing these things for yourself is just a phenomenal and very humbling feeling. So for me, it's about seeing things that very few people have been able or have the privilege to be able to see before, and those are the times that it's worth the risk. And of course, being in a very privileged position to be able to document an expedition, and show that to the world, and hopefully enlighten a few people and encourage people to do their own expeditions or whatever they want to do, follow their own dreams.
And you've brought a few things with you, haven't you?
I've
literally just unpacked yesterday.
this. So this is in no particular order.
Talk us through what you brought.
I've got a few maps. Actually, as I said, for the most part, I was actually using sort of digital maps on phones and tablets. But it is always good if you get really lost to have a nice map of Africa, so you know where the main places are, and also just to sort of show people the scale of what you're doing and point out, I'm here, that's where I'm going. And because a lot of people in the villages, people find it more impressive that you're walking to the next village than saying I'm walking to the end of the Nile, because they just don't know where it is.
Why Africa? Was there a reason you chose Africa?
Well, the Nile is the longest river in the world, and for me the most fascinating because it passes through so many different countries and cultures, that it's just a great opportunity to to undertake some genuine discovery and exploration. And some of the bits that I mentioned, petrified forest. This piece of wood is now stone. Have a feel. You can see how.
Oh my goodness!
And that's millions of years old.
Wow.
Which proves again that the Sahara Desert.
It really does feel like rock.
This is a 200 million year old piece of coral, which again has turned to rock, which fascinates me. I just like bits of rock.
So you decided your pack wasn't heavy enough.
Exactly. We needed some extra weight.
So we picked some weight up along the way.
Got some
That
maps
feels
here.
actually like a steel pipe or something, doesn't it?
These are actually some maps that I used because in places like South Sudan, it's the world's biggest swamp. The resolution just isn't good enough on digital maps. Nobody's actually done any proper aerial surveys, so you have to go back to basics in places like that and use a decent pilot's map.
How hard was it to navigate
Russian.
in that kind of place?
Very difficult, because there's so many channels and waterways that you can walk for 10 miles in one direction and then just be faced by an impenetrable swamp, which means that you either wade through it and risk the crocodiles, or you have to walk all the way around, and sometimes you've got to make those decisions. This is a spot tracker, which sends out a sort of signal every few minutes, which tells whoever's interested that you're there or not there. There's an SOS button in case you get into trouble. And for me, because I was making a documentary, I did have a sort of backup crew in London tracking my progress, putting it on a map so that my exact route can be followed.
Were you ever out there completely alone?
Through Egypt, I had to do parts on my own as well. Yeah, most parts I had local guides because good for translation. Obviously, translation. And I think that by having local guides, you get more out of it. Mm-hmm. So there were times I was on my own, but most of the time it's nice to have the company. Sweat rag.
That needs to be.
This looks like a pen. It's actually a camera. A lot of places, I just couldn't get the right permits to be able to film. So to make the documentary, I had to do some undercover filming.
That's pretty gritty.
And, you know, sometimes I got arrested as well quite a few times along the way, and that can cause problems, so it's good to sort of go a bit covert. GPS, got to make sure I don't get lost. It's a bit embarrassing, but, you know, it's always good to have an old SS survival guide.
That's fantastic. Did you learn anything from this along the way?
Well, you know, it's just which plants you can eat, and
yeah.
how to sort of rub two bits of wood together to make a fire. I mean, you know, it's kind of just in case you forget.
Get the basics right.
This is British Army first field dressing. Not pilfered at all. You know, this is...
Did you pick up any injuries out there?
I got jiggers, which is basically a worm that burrows itself under your toenails in Uganda, which was rather unpleasant, and I sort of chopped the end of my toe off with a razor blade to get this worm out, because they can be quite nasty.
That's pretty gritty.
Yeah, but this is in case you get shot. I didn't luckily get shot. What else? This is a secret money belt, so you can hide your money on the inside in case you get robbed.
This is just all standard basics for a holiday, I think.
Exactly. What else have we got here? Usual stuff. You know, head torches, pen knives. This is a good little mobile battery. You can charge your phone or your camera off.
So how much weight did you actually have to carry?
It depended on which sort of environments. I mean, there's loads of stuff in there, but yeah, I mean, I think for the earlier stages when I was in the mountains, I needed to take a lot more stuff, because you need a tent, you need a proper sleeping bag because it was actually quite cold, you need waterproofs because it was raining all the time, and that was probably 20-25 kilograms. So, you know, quite reasonably, pretty heavy,
weight.
Yeah. As I sort of progressed, I started to dump stuff, so I didn't need necessarily. I didn't need a tent in the Sahara. You can just lie out in the sand, which was nice, apart from when the scorpions came. Yeah, you know, or just a mosquito net sometimes. Get rid of the sleeping bag when it got warmer. So I got more light, light scales along the way. By the time I got to Egypt, I was literally just carrying a little sort of mini day sack, which had my camera in and the basics, because one change of clothes and off you went. So because you can stay in small guest houses or with families there.
Amazing. So. And have you always been this gritty? Do you think it's something that you've had innately, or is it something that you can learn?
I think anyone can learn it. You know, it's I've always had an interest in the outdoors and exploration in general. I studied this sort of Victorian explorers when I was at university, and did my background reading from when I was a young kid. But it's definitely something that you can learn. These are just all this sort of stuff, and being able to survive in the wild is skills that you can pick up.
Does anything actually put you out of a comfort zone?
Oh no, I was definitely out of my comfort zone a lot. But it's about overcoming that. It's about overcoming your fears and just pushing yourself. And the first step is the hardest. And actually, the expedition wasn't confirmed, I think, until about 3.5 weeks before I set off. I didn't have the funding, I didn't have any of my equipment in place because I didn't have any money to buy it, and it was all up in the air. It was that uncertainty, that just was really difficult. And actually, once I'd set off, things got easier.
You could have. I mean, did you at any point realise that you could have died at any point throughout this?
Oh yeah, several times. I mean, like I say, I had a terrible experience where the guy that was joining me died, and there were plenty of times when I came very close to things happening. In Uganda, I got chased by a crocodile, got charged by a buffalo, elephant. I got shot at in South Sudan quite a few times. We walked through a minefield in South Sudan. In Egypt, the traffic's so bad that even crossing the road is probably the most dangerous thing in the entire expedition. I've always had a real interest in areas that are a bit off the beaten track, or post-conflict zones. I set up a company when I left the army that specialises in taking people to very remote places, and I think it's important working with sort of local tourism authorities that simply don't get tourists. I've been taking people as a guide to Afghanistan and Iraq for the past 3 years, which means obviously they really need help in these places, and I think by encouraging people to go there, it's good for both the local economy but also opening people's minds. Not everywhere, just because you see it on the news, it's not always the truth that people are hearing.
Okay, so give us an example of a day on your expedition.
Okay, I think one day that really sticks out in my mind was arriving at Lake Victoria after walking for about 700 miles through the mountains and jungles of Rwanda and Tanzania. We just actually, myself and a local guide called Boston, we'd been walking for about 20 miles, and we got lost basically. We were stuck in a swamp effectively, and it got deeper and deeper, and the reeds got higher and higher, and they were well above our heads, and we spent about 2 hours just hacking through this swamp. And there were a couple of times when I fell in and the water was up to my neck, and Boston fell in as well, and then suddenly we saw the skin of what looked like a snake, and we sort of joked about it, saying, well, this is probably quite nasty python territory, and this, if one of those things wraps itself around you, you're a goner. And he was like, no, they don't come in here. But we carried on. And eventually, after a couple of hours, we emerged onto the beach and saw Lake Victoria, just the most incredible sight. And we found this village. And we'd just been joking about the snake. And on the ground, we saw pinned out a 21-foot python, a dead python. I mean, the skin had just been pegged out by the locals. And it was just huge. I mean, it's like 6 meters. And the locals were all there, just sort of sitting around. And we said, like, that's a python. And they were like, yeah, where did you find that? And it was literally just the swamp that we'd been hacking through. And they'd eaten the meat. They were going to sort of sell the skin, and it was just a real sort of reminder of just how dangerous this could be. But it was actually really nice to be able to just go and sit down with these locals and eat a bit of snake and just have a good chat with these guys who live in really harsh conditions. They had nothing, and were forced to go and eat their own whatever they could find just in the bush, really. And they were saying how the only reason they'd managed to catch the snake was because it had sneaked up and eaten one of their goats the night before. So that was the kind of thing that these amazing, just incredible stories happened every day of the expedition. Something new was around the corner. So it was just really interesting. What
was the best thing that you ate?
The best thing I ate, well, I know the worst thing I ate was bush rat. That was pretty disgusting. It was like eating rubber. The best thing I ate, Egyptian bread was quite nice, and Sudanese fool, which is like refried beans, was quite nice.
Okay, so the other question we always love to ask people is what does the word grit mean to you?
Grit, I think it means not taking no for an answer. It's sticking to your guns and just going for it. And basically, sometimes you just got to tell other people to stick it because they don't know. You're the only person that knows what you're capable of. And sometimes you don't even know what you're capable of until you've tried it. So you've just got to go for it, and that's what grit is.
You've mentioned some of the local people, the local populations that you met.
Yeah.
How do they compare?
Well, I mean, I just had the utmost admiration for everyone that I met along the way. Sometimes we'd have local guides who would, show me to the next village 20, 30 miles away, but they were doing it barefoot, and it was just amazing. And they'd be, often like, I'll just carry my, pile of firewood to the next village, and they'd have this huge, 30-kilogram bundle of firewood, walking with me, having a good chit chat, smiling and joking along the way, barefoot, in rags, and it's just like, wow, you are nails. And I met people like that all the way, fishermen that that go out swimming with nets. They don't even have a boat. They'll go out with nets in crocodile-infested waters, and they're like, well, we don't have a choice. I can't afford a boat. I need to eat. My family needs to eat. I will take that risk. So risk for me is one thing, but risks for the guys that I met along the way is that's a lifestyle. It's not just a lifestyle, it's a life. They don't have any choice. So I came away, really realising that you've got to be really grateful for what you've got.
What advice would you have for somebody who's facing some kind of a challenge or obstacle? It may not be this big, but just any kind of challenge.
I think stick with it is the only piece of advice that you need, really, because there are so many things that will get in the way, obstacles, and so many people will say you can't do that. It's impossible, or sometimes you won't necessarily have enough belief, and you think, this is just not going to work. But if you stick with it and really persist, then you can make it happen. And there will be challenges that need to be overcome, and it's not easy. It really isn't, But like I say, the hardest thing is stepping off in the first place. Once you get there, that's the enjoyable bit.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for speaking to us,
Len.
So that was wonderful. But Joe, quickly, there's no alligators in the Nile. It's crocodiles.
Same shit.
Obviously, from a
Same thing.
When
Alligator,
they're biting
crocodile.
you, it's the same thing.
Same thing.
But how awesome. I mean, if you zoom up and see like the dendritic patterns of rivers, the Nile is huge. I mean, 6 countries, 5,000 miles, a marathon every day, going through all those ecosystems, seeing all those different plants bursting on the alluvial soils. I mean, what an amazing journey.
Yeah,
Johnny?
what an amazing vocabulary.
Thank you. It's ecology.
Alluvial?
Alluvial, it's like the rich soils from like when everything washes out down the river.
Okay.
It means like why are all the big civilizations on the Nile near the Nile? They need water for irrigation.
Water, right.
They need right for your farming, for life. Megafauna.
Really, I mean, when you think about the things, what did he say? He got shot at. He got charged by bull elephants. I mean,
everything
that can happen.
Yeah, everything that could go
Journalist
wrong would go wrong.
Which makes me wonder how much study he did before he took the journey.
I mean, South Sudan, that's a really serious situation. You know, there's an amazing, he was a child soldier. He got brought out. His name's Emmanuel Jal. I invite you all to look up who that person is. But, you know, I mean, that's a really intense situation. And you have to think, now we think walking and trekking, like most of those nations, they wouldn't go beyond their villages. But what is it? Bipedal transportation was the main form of transportation forever, up until bicycles and Mr. Ford. So, I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but like the meditative walk of walking and going through the boredom, as he talks about, and all this, it used to be part of our humanity.
I keep thinking about the Transcendence Run in Queens, New York. It's
Oh, yeah.
3,000 miles around a 1 mile loop. I wonder what's worse, the Nile or...
I think at least the Nile keeps your mind
Oh,
occupied.
Nile's better.
But that's an interesting point, though, because we think about, walking the Nile just being nonstop excitement and being shot at and everything else. He talks about days after days of nothing happening, walking 25, 26 miles a day and nothing happening.
Boredom's something I don't really understand, Johnny. I mean, like, I get people say it. I've never been bored a nanosecond in my life. I mean, what a luxury. I mean, even when you're on nature, bird language.
Let's do an
is,
experiment. You just keep talking.
Yeah.
You guys gonna go? Great one, touche.
I wanted to talk about how he was like Indiana Jones.
Did feel a bit like Indiana Jones.
He just sat there, as Johnny said, cool as a cucumber, just sitting there having his tea, just talking about it. And then, but I liked, and you guys, because of the adventure racing, you know this and stuff. He stripped down that ruck, that pack, and just the little things that are in there that give you comfort when you have nothing else.
Duct tape.
Yeah, just the little things that you need become so much more important to you.
Yeah.
And they take on kind of a much bigger role than, when you're here. And you just know where everything is in that ruck, and you know right where to get to it, and you know how important it is to you.
Life
gets everything,
Life gets a lot simpler.
There's
it does.
kind of a cool visual, and you talked about the idea that he had this huge pack that weighed 65 pounds, but by the end it was down to a little day pack with nothing, and you can just picture him practically sprinting with nothing on his back when he could smell the salt from the ocean at the very end. Yeah, so it was a cool progression. You could see that, and kind of hopefully how we end life, traveling light.
Well, so when you guys go into adventure races, right, if you're in the woods or something, coming back out into society is kind of a little bit of a shocker.
Yeah. A little letdown.
Oh, huge. Absolutely. Yeah, it'd be interesting to have interviewed him 2 days later, because 2 days later, he'd be a bummed out guy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, I just want to be back on the Nile. So she probably caught him at the right time. We were still a little bit high from him.
Go back and see how he's doing.
Yeah.
Like the National Geographic.
But he's got a big beard. It doesn't look like James Bond anymore.
Instead of going back 2 days later to talk to him, maybe we could read about it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, his book's come out since then, hasn't it?
Walking the Nile?
Walking the Nile, I
By
believe.
Levison Wood.
Yep. For show notes, video, and audio of this episode, visit SpartanUpPodcast.com/044. Thank you for listening to another epic story of success.
The Spartan Up podcast is brought to you by Spartan Race.
To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.